do that again. The Finance Committee is now in session. First thing, order of business is I call for the approval of minutes for the February, March, and April meetings. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor? Meetings pass. Next subject will be long-term debt, and I turn the floor over to Mr. Frand.
Grab the microphone here. Okay, so in the last committee meeting, it was requested that we talk about how the long-term debt works for the city. So we have an agenda item of some schedules. I do want to comment that my packet seems to be, it's a lot of numbers, not much narrative, and I think in the future I'm going to add more narrative to be a bit more helpful in preparation for the committee. So the first page is what we would call this is a schedule of liabilities. This is what's submitted to the state auditor, and these are our general obligation debt liabilities. This does not reflect interest. These are the principal amounts. So these, the list includes the 2023 bonds that we issued last year, followed by the 2018 general obligation bonds that are split into two, and then and they're split into two because part of that is for the marina and part of that is for the city. There is our obligation with the Score Jail, followed by two Public Works Trust Fund loans, which are much smaller than the rest of the debt, one of which I believe is paid off this year, which is the 2004 Public Works Trust Fund loan. So as the 2018 and 2023 bonds are really the majority of the debt, and I thought we could walk through how that debt is structured and how that works. So the next page is an amortization schedule. So this is for the 2023 bonds that were issued last year. The principal amount that we borrowed was $24.5 million and 5,000. Those payments run from this year, 2024, to all the way through to 2052 because they're a 30-year bond. Interest rate's about 5%. So this is the schedule of those debt service payments. And when we say debt service, that means the principal plus the interest per year. So this year, we will be making a bond payment of almost $1.4 million. So bond payments, they're split between different funds. And the reason being that, so the marina dock replacement, the marina is paying that. Marina steps and the other projects, the city is paying that portion. So funds from the general fund are not used to pay the 2023 bonds. So as we said, the marina has a share of the payment, which you see on the schedule, you see under principal and interest in the final columns on the right. There's a city column and a marina column. So you can see a little over 50% the marina is covering, and then the city is covering the balance. So marina covers about half, and then the city portion, and we mentioned this in, I think it was last week's council meeting, or it was 2 council meetings ago. REIT 1, REIT 2, one-time sales tax, and parking proceeds from the new parking system. We combine that to cover the city's portion. And just as a rough sketch, I would say you would about $250,000 between of REIT 1, $250,000 of like REIT 2, $250 of the parking proceeds, and then maybe $50,000 of one-time sales tax. That's kind of about how it's broken out. It's probably a lot more specific or adjusted in places on a schedule if the committee is interested in seeing a schedule of how that REIT and one-time tax and parking proceeds is broken out. You know, we can provide that for the next meeting. And the bonds are callable after December 1st, 2033. So it's a 10-year period where they're not callable. And so that's kind of how it's structured. Graphically, on the next page, kind of shows you how the interest and principal payments are scheduled. So the blue sections of the column is principal, and then the orange is interest. And so you see the first 5 years, actually 4, but through 2028, you see that there's no principal. And the reason for that is we're trying to smooth it out, and we also know that the marina has to pay the 2028 bond payments during that stretch. Then they expire at 2028. And so that, we wanted to at least help them out a little bit that way and cushion it. And then after those expire, they have more capacity to pay on the 2023 bonds. That's why you see the principal payments start in 2029 and then grow over time. Okay, on the next page, we'll talk about the 2018 refunding bonds. And it was requested I talk about the history of these bonds, which I was going to do because Tim stumped me last meeting, asking me what they were for. And I was mostly correct off the cuff. So there are, if you look at the schedule here, you have your principal and your interest, and you see the columns that they are. There's new money bonds, and then a little portion for transportation, and then for the marina. So the transportation in the marina, those are refunding previous bonds, and we can talk about a little bit about what those bonds were for. But the new money bonds portion, was for the North Bulkhead. So that's what that financed. The transportation in the marina, that's the refunding bonds, and there was bonds issued in 2008. And those bonds did some marina dredging and other capital work at the marina, and then they're also refunding. Those were also refunding some 1997 debt, and there was transportation infrastructure projects involved in that as well. I couldn't find specifically what those were, but it was just city infrastructure related to traffic. So that's when 2018 rolled around. That's why we had a lower interest rate. So we refunded those bonds and then financed the North Bulkhead. So that's what the 2018 bonds are. And as I mentioned, you can see the marina and transportation, those payments expire after 2028, and then the new money bonds continue into 2038. And then the next page is really, I think, just the total debt service with the principal and interest combined. And the new money bonds are paid by the general fund. And then transportation is paid by REIT 2, and the bonds are callable after 2030 if we chose to do that. Any questions about the long-term debt?
Councilmember Harris, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh,
No, Dale assures me that it picks it up as long as I project and so on. So my only question is, and then it went out of my head, but it'll come back. Yeah, it is basically the split on what's coming from the Marina Fund. That's an estimate. Is there correct?
On what bond? Which bond?
On the 2023 bonds.
No, on the schedule, that's what it would be.
No, but I mean, what I mean is you're estimating the amount of money that would be necessary to pay for like dock replacement and so on.
You mean as far as the projects are
Yeah.
concerned? Right, so when those bonds were approved, there were certain dollar amounts associated with each project. For the dock replacement, I think it was about 12.7 million.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is there any flexibility? Would it require like a council vote or something if it turned out that some of these expenses are, significantly different? Is it something where you have the flexibility to move, that around?
Right, so if, let's say, the docks project hypothetically didn't
And I'm not
happen,
borrowing trouble here. I'm just
No.
asking hypothetically.
we'd have the flexibility to move money from one bond finance project to another that are cited in the bond ordinance.
Mhm.
So you can move it to Redondo, or you can move it to the steps, but you can't move it to, say, 24th, project. That's not funded by the bond. So as long as is one of the bond projects, we have flexibility amongst those projects, but not outside of those.
Okay, intra,
Right.
rather than taking them outside of that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No questions there. All right, so next subject, you were going to give us an update on the disbursement of ARPA funds, I believe?
So this, we just recently filed our annual report with federal government, so these numbers are updated through March 31st, because when we report the federal government, it's from, the reporting periods are from April through the following March. The first thing of note is underneath where it says through March 31st, you see a column, the last dark blue column says cumulative expenditures. So we've expended almost 5.8 million of the ARPA funds. ARPA funds totaled a little over $9 million. And the light blue columns show what remaining budget remains from each project and what remains to be obligated. So if you see zeros on a line under that, that means that project is complete. And in the interest of time, I don't want to read through every single project. But there's a number of them that are complete. The ones that are not, that have remaining amounts, we touch on those a bit. So there's the tenant restroom, you'll see has 400,000 remaining, which is the entire budget of that project. We have not expecting to actually get that obligated this year. So I think the bids are coming in higher than expected, which has been a problem. So I also would say any of the remaining budget we have not determined yet, made any decisions on recommending to be repurposed or anything. We're just looking at what the situation is. So it's possible that we can have two capital projects where we could put the ARPA money into that and take REIT out and put it in for the tenant restroom. So really just swapping it out so that it's obligated and spent. Because if it's not obligated by the end of 2024, then we can lose the funding. So there's that. Then the next one you see is the marina, is under marina infrastructure. So that's the Marina Steps project. I expect that to be obligated by the end of the year. And let's see, then we have ADA compliance program and additional traffic calming. So those, we think it's possible that the new Redondo traffic cameras, the revenue from those cameras are very restricted, but we could use it for those. And so it could be that we could free up some ARPA funds by using that revenue instead for the traffic calming.
Yeah, you're talking just the traffic calming money, because the ADA compliance wouldn't necessarily, you think it could be used as well, so the total 188.9? Because ADA slowing down speeds assists those with disabilities getting across the road or something, that kind of reasoning?
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be what I was thinking.
All right.
So, well, like I said, we haven't determined yet, but that's kind of what we're looking at. Then you'll see below, there's 51,866. I think that's mental health support, that's the crisis response specialist. And then the next one is the police officers. So those are obligated, and those will end this year. So that'll be exhausted by the end of the year. Nonprofit foundation, that was ended up being funds given to nonprofits. We have 29,000 left of that. It's not obligated. And then 50,000 of Fieldhouse play equipment. Well, that project's going, so that should be spent by the end of the year, and it's already obligated. And then 20,000 for marina redevelopment materials. So there's a possibility of repurposing some of these monies, but we have to not yet worked on that recommendation. But I would think I would do an ARPA update for council in the near future, and that would be a part of that update. Would be recommending repurposing some of these.
First question before I turn it over to my colleagues. So the marina infrastructure one,
Right.
you had mentioned that would probably most likely be spent this year. Should we even have that in the remaining obligation column?
Yeah, because it means we need to have more contracts in place.
Okay,
for it to be considered
okay,
obligated.
understood. It just seemed like you said you didn't see any problem with it, and I was, when we look at, my comment was, when we look at the potential of shifting nearly 1.9 million, and that being the largest share of it, did we even want to do that?
Right.
Even open up that box?
Right. I think with that project, as far as we understand the timing, I mean, what funds we can switch around. Maybe we can put the ARPA funds somewhere else, make sure it's obligated before the end of the year, so as not to affect the Marine Stuff project.
Fair enough, forward thinking, like it. Councilmember Harris, did you have any comments or questions?
Just general fund support that's obligated.
Yeah, because that was part of the annual budget for 2024. So that was the one, I think it's what, nearly 1.3, but $1.2 million that was used to help close the budget gap in the 2024 budget year.
Okay, and that's unconstrained? I mean, it's not, applied to a particular
Right.
spending item at this point? Okay, that's all I got. Thanks.
All right. The next item on the agenda is, you want to do the REIT update?
So this was, had some good timing because King County sent us their numbers like 2 hours ago for April. So if there's good news in this, in this packet, it's probably with the REIT update. So, and one of the reasons that we included REIT, discussion on REIT was, you can tell, looking at the schedules or the graphs, last year we saw with the 7% mortgage rates and the slowing down of the real estate market, it affected our REIT revenue. Okay, so if you look, the first schedule shows the number of real estate transactions in the city from 2021 through March of this year. And then that's, the chart breaks that down next to this schedule by quarter. And so what was encouraging about this year is that yellow bar under quarter one is, looks like we're rebounding up from where we were in the first quarter of last year. So first quarter of 2023, there were 69 real estate transactions, which you can see if you look over at 2022 and 2021, that's almost half. So that's when everything slowed down, and then in 2024 we have 78 transactions. The table below, the taxable selling price, you can see the chart follows pretty much the same graphic as it does above with that yellow bar for 2024 quarter one. So we had 78 transactions. The taxable selling price of all those transactions was nearly $49 million. In 2023, at the same time for quarter one, it was almost $37 million. So that's an encouraging increase as far as taxable sale price goes. For April of this year, we have 39 transactions as opposed to 26 last April. So we had 13 more during that month than we did previously. This taxable selling price was $28.4 million, which is significantly more than the 17.7 the year before. So it's encouraging. I don't know, because people are kind of priced into their house if they're paying 3% on their mortgage, and now the rates are 7%. But I think, like our broker here, he was thinking maybe people have just gotten used to 7%. It's just the reality right now, and they need to move. So we are seeing an increase in transactions.
So short math is, it sounds like we're about up 20-25%.
Hopefully,
Okay.
if we can end the year collecting about, see, last year we did about 1.2. If we were to get to about 1.4 or even a little bit more, we'd be over what we projected in the budget, and that I'd be thrilled. So,
Yeah, I
and to
think we would.
clarify, I was going to talk about what REIT is that the city imposes a 0.25% on real estate transactions, and it's used to fund capital projects. So REIT 1 is revenue is restricted to funding capital projects, and the difference with REIT 2 is it's restricted, but more so for infrastructure and parks. So that's the difference between the usages between REIT 1 and REIT 2. But this is the most encouraging piece of our packet this evening. So, but it's nice to have some good news.
A question, if I may?
Councilmember Harris.
Chair, thank you. Roughly speaking, I don't want to, I guess, but do you know how many, how many total properties this is based on? Just ballpark?
Well, it would be, that's the,
No, I mean in the city. I mean, like, is it like, 8,000, 9,000 homes that are, condos, saleable pieces of real estate?
you mean as a total?
Yeah.
For, you mean all the properties in the city?
Yeah.
I don't have that off the top of my head, no.
Okay, no, I'm just always struck by the churn. I've mentioned that before, it's by the by. Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to the monthly general fund report.
So, the general fund, one item that I haven't included on here that I'm going to start tonight is the beginning fund balance number, which also is a topic in the next item in the packet. The forecast is early in the year. I didn't want to put a fund balance number out there because it's such a critical number that when I didn't really have, we didn't have a handle on what it was going to be. We're very close to having the year-end process completed and 2023 closed. So our beginning fund balance number is going to be close in the neighborhood of 4.3 million, which was quite a bit less than we expected. 16.67% is little over 4.7 million. So 2023 is going to finish under the threshold of 16.67%. So that happened, I guess is what I'm saying. That's where we're at. And we'll probably talk a bit more about that in the forecast. So that's our starting place, and then these reports going forward will have the beginning fund balance and the effect that the income or loss has on that amount. Property tax, of course, is not included. Well, I mean, it's included, but we received it from the county last week. So that should be in the April report, and we got about $2 million there. So, that will be all. That's, as we always say, it's quarter 2 and quarter 4 that'll show that revenue.
So just, you mentioned the property tax, so the budget, this doesn't include April, it's just through March.
Right.
Are we looking close or to what you projected, a little high?
Yeah, I think we got about 2.2 million. I think our budget's about 5.5. We might have gotten more than the 2.1. We just looked this afternoon, so and it's not sent in one lump sum. But I can find out exactly how much it was, because maybe it was at about 2.4.
I mean, the only reason why any of these revenues, obviously through this thing, I can see you guys are doing a good job of keeping your costs down because the revenue started out a little slow, particularly you spoke last time about sales tax. But if we're looking better on some particular areas, well, that's just going to make our situation a little bit better. And just, obviously we're going to be paying attention to that. So, yeah, we'd love to hear, being April and October being your big months of when that revenue comes in.
And that's why I've said with quarter one, even though this report shows a loss of like 900,000, I'm actually still encouraged as far as the budget performance goes, because it doesn't really include our, property tax receipts that come in April. Sales tax, as you just mentioned. So sales tax, we get that the last week of the month, and so it actually comes in right after I turn this in for the committee. But having seen April's numbers, we're still trailing a little bit, about 60,000 where we were last year, which is about 4.8%. And it's really a slowdown. It looks like a slowdown in construction sales tax, because that was short by about 100,000. So there's probably a relationship there.
Is there a way we could, maybe the next meeting, the June one, show us a breakdown?
Yeah, we have a sales tax report, I think, more detailed than what I've shown the council, and I thought that could be a supplement to this.
Yeah, it wouldn't be every meeting, but on every other or every quarter, at least seeing where we are against each of your buckets would be nice.
Yeah, and I talked to Gary and tax finance directors, we had lunch, and they are seeing the same thing, is that their sales tax is flattening out as well. So it's not just in Des Moines. I did want to comment on the expenditure side. City manager and IT, those departments show over budget, and really the main reason for that is the same for each department, is there's a lot of annual expenditures that are incurred in January, so a lot of association memberships, those types of things. For IT, a lot of maintenance agreements that are annual, they're signed in January. So those should flatten out a bit, or at least smooth out as time goes on. Public safety business office, that's also over budget, and I anticipated a question that maybe, what is public safety business office? So what that is that's where we pay SCORE and what else, and the public defender. And in terms of SCORE, we budgeted them at $750,000 based on some assurances we had from SCORE. Unfortunately, those did not come to fruition, and so we are paying about a little over $1 million this year. So that's going to be over budget. And yeah, so we have to pay for it. We're not going to leave SCORE. So.
Councilor Nutty.
Going forward, have we negotiated different pay schedule with SCORE, so it's not quite as much?
I think one thing we're doing is decreasing our average daily population that our charges are based on, so that should drop our costs. The issue we had with them is that they wanted to give us $250,000 decrease, but then their policy says they'd have to do that for every city. And so they're not talking 250 anymore, they're talking about $3 million decrease. But part of their budget. What they're supposed to be doing is, if they have revenue from contracts that's more than they budgeted, that should roll into cost reduction for the owner cities. And so we're working on making sure that they're doing that, because we haven't seen it.
Well,
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Their costs have gone up, just like everybody's, right? So the cost to, of their employees and all that has increased. So we're paying more than we used to pay, and that's across the board. So, we're working, we're on the executive board, we're on the finance board at SCORE. We've been pressuring them to figure out ways to cut costs, add new jurisdictions as clients, to continue to get people in there that will help offset some of our costs. So that's actively happening. The other thing we're doing is we're just looking to reduce our usage of SCORE. And that is just done through other options for incarceration, like home monitoring. We've been using home monitoring a lot more on nonviolent offenders. We've been looking at different bail models for nonviolent offenders and that kind of thing, where we're, instead of keeping someone at SCORE for longer, we're trying to get them out sooner. So it's kind of a push and pull as far as how you can do that, but also ensure public safety. And so that's where we're at on that. And also, as far as the lid lift goes, there was a piece of that would be scheduled to cover the increased costs of SCORE.
Yeah. Along with all that, the city of Auburn is also using SCORE more, which means we get charged less, because it's like a pie, and if somebody eats up more of the pie, then our piece shrinks. So I want to send them a gift basket.
I will say though, in the last 4 months, using some of the kind of more creative strategies, our average daily population has gone down probably about 30%. So that will help. The issue is we get charged based on our 3-year average.
Right.
So, although it's going down, we aren't going to see those savings, until that kind of works its way into the average and starts bringing our total down.
Right. It'd be progressive.
Yeah.
Councilmember Harris.
So, not getting too into the weeds or outside, but do we get charged the same day rate regardless of the services that are offered to the incarceree, if that's even a word? In other words, there might be somebody there who is going through some sort of drug kind of a thing versus somebody who's simply, doing time. I mean, is it a variable kind of a deal, or is it just a straight per day?
I believe as an owner city, we're paying the same amount. The cities that contract, they do get charged more for medical services, but that's included in our rate.
Right. So we're paying about $84,000 a month, and that's what we're paying this year in 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on the operating budget? Okay. All right, moving into the 5-year forecast.
So you've had a chance to look at this forecast. Notice the beginning fund balance, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is around $4.3 million projected for this year. So that's what we're looking at is the 2023 ending fund balance. What's projected for this year is an ending fund balance of about 3.6, between 3.6 and 3.7 million if this holds up. If the net activity would be a loss of about 693,000, which is a little bit higher than the budgeted loss. I think some of that's attributable to, like as we mentioned, the sales tax flattening out, not growing as projected in the budget. Now, if you look into the future years, you'll notice for 2025, the ending fund balance is actually negative. So this is a pretty grim forecast. Now, this forecast is based on just if service levels remain the same in the city, and there's no levy lid lift. So we didn't include any additional funding from a levy lid lift in the forecast. Sales tax revenue growth, we have growing between 1% and 3% over those 5 years. But I don't think that the takeaway from this is like run for the hills, we're going broke. I think the takeaway, looking at a forecast such as this that shows our fund balance dropping, is that there's critical operating decisions to make this year. Going through the budget process, it's decisions on what level of service the city is going to provide. What does the community want? And then there's, as an anecdote, I have another finance director friend that I keep in touch with, and emailed him about 2 weeks ago. He was like, hey Dave, how's it going? And usually he has a horror story for me that makes me very happy. I work in the city of Des Moines. But he said, he had been under a lot of stress, just back from vacation. Their general fund was nearly broke. They were looking at utilities loaning the general fund money. They were looking at the property tax levy lid lift. However, the council was not interested in raising revenue and was not interested in making cuts. And so that's another story where I'm thankful here in Des Moines that we're collaborating on, looking at the direction things are going, but council and staff are open to suggestions and open to possibilities and solving the problem. So, this is not a very positive outlook if things stay the same. But I think in our city that we know they can't. So whether or not the lid lift passes or not, there's going to be big decisions. It's a critical year for the city, I think, this next budget for 25 and 26. But I think if we tackle that, the city will be back into kind of a more normal place where it was before. We're suffering in the post-COVID economic climate. One of the things also that we're looking at, a couple of things. I was wanting to do in the budget process, I've talked to some following up on the long-term financial plan that we had come up during the biennial budgeting discussion, and I talked to a consultant that we can work with. They were referred to us by the city of Sammamish. They work with Bury and the city of Kenmore. That we can consult with, they can work on the forecast, giving it more analysis, and they can also help us come up with budget strategies as far as closing budget gaps. So I think has great value. We haven't gotten their proposal yet, so I don't know how much that would cost, or exactly what their scope of work would be, but it was a positive meeting. I thought, given that this is a critical year for the city, that would probably be a wise move. Also being under 16.67%, I think it could be a time where we look at the reserve policy. 16.67% is a recommendation of the Government Finance Officers Association, but they also have other literature on reserve policies. So it could be possible, and I haven't looked into this yet, that we have a reserve policy that maybe it's a lower threshold but has a mechanism for building a contingency fund or a rainy day fund that will stabilize things long term. So there might be different options out there that may be recommended. It's just something I'm going to look into. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
When we look at the $4.3 million fund balance, so that's something that's just thought of today. Then we're also looking at cost control, and specifically Bonnie Wilkins has been looking into parks, and she's going to actually be at the next committee meeting and talk about some cost control stuff that she's going to be implementing in the Parks Department.
Yeah, I appreciate this work. I would like to see two different versions of this, because
Okay.
one, obviously, roughly without the levy,
Right.
we're gonna, to balance the budget, we're gonna need to cut $2 million a year, roughly, because you add the 4 officers and some of the equipment. So let's just call it $2 million of the $3 million. So I'd like to see what that'll look like. And then also, if the levy passes, what we do. I'm optimistic about, you've given us some good news that you've seen recently where we might be maintain our 16.67%. I've over the last years, I've saw the logic in that, but if there's other possibilities, I think it affords all of us to look at it, all of the council. The other one is, and you talked about it a little bit, we kind of had a brief conversation. I think there's some people that don't understand that our costs have increased, but our revenue hasn't, and that we will have to make sacrifices in parks and recreation, public works, it may be in the police and so forth. And I've kind of like to see a smorgasbord of potential items that would be on a cut list, because I think some folks need to understand what would be at stake here if this levy doesn't pass. So if we could get something like that, say for the next meeting, if you find it to be more pertinent and delivered to the council before, so we all see it, I don't think anybody'd have a problem with it, but at least by the next meeting would be nice, the next finance meeting. But if you felt it was more relevant to show at an earlier time, I'm not going to get in the way of that. I would agree to that. I don't know how my colleagues feel. Councilmember Harris.
Couple of things. I would strongly support, I attended the last Bury City Council meeting, and they hired this strategic guy to find money in the cushions, and it was remarkably productive. They came up with just these things,
Yeah.
things like basically shoreline fees and stuff that turned out to be really good things.
Yeah, we might be talking to the same guy. So,
Well, if it is,
yeah.
thumbs up. I mean, because it was just really, and just, we're talking about post-COVID, and I mean, what do you think would be different, I mean, in 2025 or 2026 than now? I mean, aren't we past COVID, or is there sort of a blanket on it?
Well, I would say post-COVID is, when I say that, I'm thinking mainly of the inflationary environment that we're in. So, was it 2022, the consumer price index in June was 10.1%, and now it's down to 4%. So, you know, if it continues to drop, well then, you know, our inflation, you know.
No, I mean, there's a reasonable expectation that, you know, the Fed is gonna do whatever
Right.
they do and so on. And your assumptions are based on, it looks like sort of 1%-ish
Right.
Growth.
Right.
All across the board, which I like a good deal because it's just, then if things are better, then
Right.
yahoo. I'm just, no, I'm just, because I look at like the port and, you know, they're already going gangbusters. And
Right.
so I'm just wondering how things might be different other than just interest rates.
Right. Well, I think, too, when I think about the COVID environment or post-COVID, I think cities had strategies that they had to use to deal with the pandemic. When I was in Tukwila, you know, we got partially furloughed. The strategy here was to keep people employed. So I think that there were strategies that were implemented, but then, as was said, then the bills come due. And so now I think that's kind of where we're at, is like, okay, we've got through it, and now we have inflation, and now we also have whatever fallout from the strategies we used, we have to deal with now to get back, you know, on our feet, and so to speak. So that's kind of what my perspective is.
Okay, very, very good, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
All right, is there anything real quick before we adjourn the meeting? Councilman Rivers?
This may be, you know, out of the box or, but it strikes me that our meetings sometime, they seem to be like a day before or a day after you get key numbers. And so I'm just wondering if there might be some value in moving this meeting like a week later, or maybe that's not a good idea. But in other words, if the meeting had been a week later, we would have had these, you know, end of month or end of quarter. I don't know how that works with the city's plans or my colleagues, but.
Yeah, I'd say at this point, we just keep it the same. I understand we're the first part of the next month, so even though we've got numbers that are up to date for the month, what you've seen is some information, but as far as formulating that and getting it ready, it takes a little bit more time than that. I think just giving us a pulse of what you see is adequate at this time. Plus, all of our other council meetings are so scheduled, working with people's work schedules, timing and so forth. So I have no issue with that. I mean, obviously, if there was something pertinent where you felt we needed to meet and have some kind of a special committee meeting a couple weeks from now or something like that, then absolutely, I think we'd all be in agreement if there was something that would be foundationally changing our finances or budget. Anything else? No? With that, do you have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? The Finance Committee meeting is adjourned.